Those of you who are watching live or those of you who are watching after on our podcast and YouTube. Welcome in. My name is Emma Goldblatt, and I'm the program manager of Peace Advocacy Network. For those of you who don't know, PAN is a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to promote a peaceful existence through veganism, social justice, and respect for the Earth's inhabitants and resources. PAN strives for the absence of violence in the lives of people and animals by eliminating oppression and inequity. To this end, PAN is committed to fostering, cultivating, and preserving a culture of diversity and inclusion among everyone we work with. Today here we have with us Angela Crawford. We're so happy to have her here for a book talk about her newest book, The Vegan Transformation. And for those of you who don't know, Dr. Angela is a psychologist, vegan educator, and author of The Vegan Transformation, A Journey to Heal Yourself and the World. She holds a doctorate in clinical psychology and previously worked as a psychotherapist for 25 years, empowering clients toward greater holistic well-being. She's a speaker and teacher about the psychological benefits of veganism and is passionate about the power of personal transformation to create a more fulfilling and purposeful life and a kinder and healthier world. So, welcome, Angela.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you here. And we are just going to kind of jump right in. I have some questions to ask Angela, and then at the end, we will, if we have enough time, have some questions from everyone in the Zoom or on our Facebook Live. So I will monitor for that. Um, yeah, so I just wanted to start off by asking you about your vegan journey and what inspired it.
Yeah, my vegan journey started first with becoming vegetarian. I think that's not uncommon for some of us to start through the vegetarian door first. But I first became vegetarian when I actually learned about workers in meat processing plants, which is a somewhat unusual path. I happened to see a program about workers in a meat processing plant, and many were immigrants, and their work environment led to a lot of injuries, and they were discouraged from seeking treatment or taking time off work, or they might lose their job. And just something, even though the program did not show any gory details or show anything about really what they were actually doing for work, it just shared enough that it got me feeling, first of all, empathy for the workers and the situation that many of them were in, but also it made me feel that I started to question my food choices and how my food got to me and the whole process of animal agriculture in a way that I never had before. And, very quickly I started to think, well, if you're not liking how the workers are treated, what do you think happens to the animals? What are your thoughts about that? And so the very next day, I actually bought first a vegetarian cookbook and made a lasagna, which I was not a cook. I didn't even have the proper pots and pans to make the recipe, so I was running out to buy them while I was cooking. And I made the lasagna, and it was delicious, and my family loved it. And I found this whole new journey of discovery where I began looking into vegetarianism and veganism. And I began reading books and trying new recipes and learning about all aspects of it, the ethical, the health, the nutritional. And, first I became vegetarian. I just realized once I understood more about animal agriculture, I just couldn't have meat anymore. And I had a sense that the dairy and eggs were also very cruel, but I didn't yet take that step until several years later. It took me a while to fully connect with that and make that shift. But finally, so I became vegetarian in 2000, early 2007, and vegan in 2019. Just something in what I'd learned over time and my own personal growth journey. I realized I wasn't yet fully aligned with my values when I was eating some animal products and also buying animal products in terms of other items. And so I decided it was time to take a look at this. I bought the book, The 30-Day Vegan Challenge by Colleen Patrick Gaudreau. And that just helped me look at the final blocks I had that were getting in the way of me embracing a fully vegan lifestyle and to address those. And I became vegan, and it just led to so many changes in me and realizing that it was more than just a personal lifestyle choice. It was something that could make a difference for so many things I cared about. So it led me onto this whole path of writing this book and shifting my own life in many ways.
Great, thank you for sharing. What led you to be inspired to write the vegan transformation?
Yeah. I've long envisioned writing a book. It's been a dream for, since childhood, but during much of my life, for 25 years, I worked as a psychotherapist. I'm a psychologist, and during that time, my work was pretty consuming, and I had a vision of writing, but it just didn't happen. And then when I became vegan, I knew this dream I've had of writing a book, this is the time. And I'd seen that there was a lot of books about the ethics of veganism, a lot of books about the health benefits of veganism, but I hadn't seen quite as much about how going vegan affects us emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. And for me personally, there were so many shifts in those areas when I embraced a vegan lifestyle. It's like I was finally being more true to myself in ways that I hadn't even realized I wasn't fully being true to myself before. So I felt more aligned. I felt more at peace. I felt freer because I didn't have to participate in a system that I think at some level I never felt good about, but I once believed, like many of us, that I had to eat animal products. So when I became fully vegan, a lot changed for me internally. I didn't have health issues, so it wasn't so much a health change for me. It was more this inner peace and freedom and sense of alignment with my values and purpose and all these different shifts. And so I met other vegans as I joined different groups around the world. I found other vegans reporting changes like that, that a lot of people were serving their purpose through veganism, whether it be a business or volunteer work or advocacy or activism. And I just, wanted to explore that more. What is that shift in us? And also, I felt like there was some research about some of the challenges we face, but not as much about the benefits. So I wanted to capture that too, that it can, even if there are challenges, there are also so many benefits when we align with our values. And rather than feeling deprived, most vegans I talk to find that a lot of things open up for them, not only food choices, but also their inner world, because now they're embracing something that I think we had to compartmentalize before in order to not see it. So just wanted to capture that. And so, that led me to first doing a survey where I surveyed about 350 vegans. They filled out a 11 question survey about the impact on their life of being vegan. And then I went on to do interviews with about 75 of them in more depth. And the core findings that came from the surveys and interviews are what the book is, sharing. And some of it is the benefits of this lifestyle, and then also the challenges that we do face and how do we cope with those, what helps us, get through those. So that's what inspired me. And also wanting people that I knew that were spiritual and compassionate people to see these benefits if possible.
Totally. That sounds really cool. I didn't realize that it wasn't just about your own journey, but also surveying a bunch of other people to get a big sample size and see what they have to say. So that's very cool. Um, I wanted to now move on to talking a little bit about communication, because that's a huge topic that we just had our Vegan Activist Academy. We just wrapped up on Sunday. So congrats. I think we might have a student in here with us. And communication is such a big topic that people struggle with. So I really wanted to hone in on that today. Um, and the first thing I wanted to ask was, what are some of the most common mistakes that vegans make when communicating with non-vegans?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure some of us have different mistakes than others, but I think there are also some common challenges that we face. And I think part of it is that we're so passionate. Once something has broken through for us to lead us on this vegan path, we just want everyone else to see it too, because we realize the suffering and we want that suffering to end. And so I think there's a few things that can happen, especially in that super enthusiastic and highly passionate place that we might be in. And so one might be that we're trying to share it with everyone without any awareness of where their stage of readiness for change is. People are in different levels of readiness for change or openness to change. And so sometimes we'll have that person that is in there's a stages of change model that goes from pre-contemplation to contemplation where we're starting to think about change, and then preparation where we're getting ready, then action, we're doing it, and then maintenance where we're maintaining it. Well, sometimes someone might be in that way pre-contemplation place, and we're trying to push them into action that they're just not ready to take yet. So I think one mistake can be to relate to everyone in that same way as if they're ready for action when maybe they need some seeds planted to even help them be further along that continuum where they'd even start to contemplate or maybe be ready more to prepare. So just thinking about where is someone at, we may not want to waste lots of energy if someone is totally close to the message, because there's a lot of people that are further along and more curious and open where we could be bringing more energy. And I think one other mistake might be this tendency that sometimes because we've broken through to this new awareness, we get impatient that others haven't yet. I've certainly felt that, especially earlier on. I think it took me a while to get like what Dr. Melanie Joy teaches about our social conditioning and how prominent that conditioning, that social and cultural conditioning is around eating animals and how dominant that is. Once we break through, we think, well, we broke through, everyone else should, but it's still very culturally dominant to eat animals. And so we're helping people break through this dominant social messaging to another place. And that's not always easy for people. So sometimes we're sort of judgmental or critical or impatient. And that unfortunately doesn't really usually have the effect we want it to have. And, we might think about if someone treats us that way, maybe about something they're passionate about, maybe a political view or a religious view, and they're talking down to us or judging us for not being in that same place. Usually we're going to have our walls up. We're going to be defensive, even if something they're saying might have a good message in it. We're just not going to want to hear it. So I think recognizing that we need to remember our own journey, that most of us weren't vegan, and how can we sort of meet people where they're at and invite them in rather than lecturing or judging, kind of meet them where they're at and address concerns or questions they have and things like that. So those are some of the mistakes that I might see that we can make.
Yeah, that's good advice. How do we approach these interactions without coming across as judgmental or like too intense?
Yeah. No, it's not always easy. And first of all, be kind to ourselves when there's times we don't handle it the best. I mean, even though I'm a psychologist and I've helped clients over many years with communication, it doesn't mean like I'm perfect in my own life all the time. I'll have times where I get snarky or don't say things in the best way. So first of all, just realizing we are human. And so just first, that's okay. But over time, we're wanting to get more effective at this and we're wanting to have more impact. So one important step, I think, is for any communication, it can help to think about what is our intention for that communication. Because we're trying to accomplish different things in different situations. And sometimes we just don't have a clear sense of what is it I actually want here? What is the intention I hold for this particular conversation or this relationship? And how do I show up in a way that best meets that intention? Because sometimes we may be wanting to help someone gain more awareness, but other times we're just handling maybe a social gathering and it's not really a time that we're going to be advocating per se. We're just maybe trying to make sure that we have food to eat and that we can, enjoy ourselves at this gathering. So kind of thinking about what is your intention, that kind of it connects you with your wise brain so you're not just reactive and you can start to think of how do I speak up in this situation that fits with what I want to accomplish here. And I think another piece of that puzzle is thinking of assertive communication versus aggressive or passive. Assertive is where we speak up in a way that is honest and, speaks our truth and yet is still respectful of the other person and tries to be relational versus lecturing. So we're trying to treat them with respect and ourselves with respect while having conversations. And I think one other piece of that is we can share it in terms of our own discoveries. We once didn't know certain things either. So someone might be saying, that question that we all get frustrated with, like, where do you get your protein? And we get annoyed, but we probably wondered that at some point. It's such a dominant paradigm in our culture, unfortunately, that people wonder these things. So it's an opportunity to educate and to share, I once thought that too, but this is what I've discovered. And so we're partnering with them rather than judging. So those are just some thoughts.
Definitely. That perfectly transitions to my next question, which was talking about empathy and how that is so important in effective advocacy, and how do we stay open when someone is like closed off, or as you talked about earlier, in the pre like contemplative stage.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a few things that could be helpful. One is, again, sometimes it helps to go back and remember our own process and all the seeds that might have been planted for us along the way. Because I think once we break through to veganism, it feels like we were always there or, we always got it. But, there was a time where a lot of this was, we may have had our own barriers. We may have had false beliefs. We might have had questions. And so I think if we can remember our own journey and even journal about it or write about it, sometimes it helps us to remember the questions we had, the things that planted seeds along the way. Even if, it happened overnight for some people, there were probably seeds planted that made you more ready. So one is, remembering that for most of us, unless we were raised in a vegan family, it was a process over time. And, realizing too that it is breaking through these cultural norms, if you will. Norms don't mean things are right, but they are what is quote unquote the status quo. And so sometimes that's hard for people to break through, and because we are very social creatures, and some of us may struggle more with this whole being different thing than other people do. And so people are going to be different places on their journey. So we can have empathy that this is a path that different people are going to come to this at different times and in different ways and for different reasons. And how do we meet them where they are with support and encouragement that might help them on their next step? And I just want to say there is always hope. I'm not the greatest all the time in the one-on-one communications as I wish I could be, but I wrote this book in part because not only do I want to encourage vegans, and so the book is for vegans, but it's also for pre-vegans. I wrote it to, be inviting and non-judgmental. And I've had a few of the pre-vegans in my life reach out to me and say, hey, I'm really seriously thinking about this now. And I would have never thought that from some of the people that are saying this to me. So it just lets me know that there is always hope if we can invite people and walk with them on the journey and be a great, I guess, role model for the positives of this. So,
That's a huge win. That's awesome. I love that. Now I'm like, maybe I need to write a book. If that's what's gonna get through to people in my life. Um, what are some more practical tips for engaging with family and friends who are pre-vegan, as you say?
yes. I first want to normalize that family and friends can actually be the hardest, and maybe particularly family. I saw this in my work previously as a psychotherapist, not working with vegans at the time, but just helping people change. Family was always the most resistant to hear what another family member thought or believed or wanted. They would hear it from someone else sometimes before they would hear it from a family member. So there seems to be this dynamic sometimes that we can have in our families that we minimize or dismiss things that they teach us or tell us. And that's not always the case, because I did know some people I interviewed for my book, they told their family about veganism and their family went vegan with them. So it can happen, but just to know that it can also be hard, and that sometimes family is more resistant even than other people might be for varying reasons. So sometimes we might have to let go of this idea that we want to change our family. It just depends on your situation. Sometimes they might come along with you on the journey when you share why you became vegan and all the benefits for them, the animals, health, whatever, the planet. Sometimes they'll come with you, but if they're really close to it, sometimes what we need to switch to then is shifting more to asking them to be our allies. Dr. Melanie Joy, who many of us know about, who wrote the book Why We Love Dogs, Eat Pigs, and Wear Cows. And she also wrote the book Beyond Beliefs, which is a great book about vegan communication. I highly recommend it for people that are wanting to improve their communications with family and others. But she says, sometimes, asking someone to be vegan will not be a realistic goal because the person is just not open or ready for that at this point. But we can say, hey, I'd like you to be a support on my journey at least, because I need to know you're going to stand with me and not try to get in the way of my path of being vegan, because this is very important to me. And so I want your support. And you can share how that support might unfold. Like maybe when you're at an outing, they don't, if someone else makes fun of the vegan lifestyle, they don't join in with that. They rather support you. They might make sure there's good vegan food available at any gathering you go to along with you to know that you're going to be having the food you need, or when you're going to a restaurant that you make choices that have options. So, and sometimes if someone becomes an ally, they're a little more open to learning about it because you're not putting the pressure right then on them that they immediately have to change. They can learn about it and support you and feel some curiosity without feeling pressure. And that can be a good way, actually, for sometimes people to move further along that continuum of change that we were talking about earlier. So, not getting frustrated necessarily if they don't change right away, but planting seeds and at least getting them to support you if at all possible.
Okay, interesting. That kind of made me think about does this come down to the thing that's like if you were planning to do something, but then someone tells you that to do something, you don't want to do it anymore?
Yeah, there is truth to that. There really is. I think when we make changes, it has to feel aligned inside of us or it's not going to stick. We need to feel, even if someone else encouraged it, it needs to feel like our own thing for it to really have staying power. So that's where I think lecturing or telling people what to do or, judging people sometimes backfires because most of us don't respond to that in a positive way anyway.
Well, we've touched on a lot about communication with non-vegans or pre-vegans, but I wanted to ask a little bit about more about the psychology and emotional aspects of the vegan journey. Um, what do you think are some of the most overlooked challenges on the vegan journey?
Yeah, well, there's, I think, a couple of areas where these challenges can come in. So, one aspect is certainly the social part, because as I mentioned, we are social creatures. And so, for some people, it's harder than others to be different or step outside of what those around them are doing. And so, for some people, if those in their life are not supportive or understanding, or if they're the only vegan in their network, it can be really challenging. So, first, just to normalize that, because we are very socially wired creatures, we do need social support to thrive. So one set of challenges, goes more around the importance of social relationships and how that affects us when people in our life are not supportive. So I think that's where the building vegan allies in our life, and then also having a good vegan support network, groups like this, having your own, network maybe in your community of, there's vegan and plant-based groups in various communities and joining those, or online groups, coming to book clubs and meetings like this. Just we need support so that when we have those tough moments, we know we're not alone and we have some tools for navigating the challenging social situations and holidays and other things. So that's one area. And then I think the other is more the emotions that come up when we learn about animal suffering and we witness the suffering and, the cruelty to animals in animal agriculture and other industries. And that can lead to sort of a form of traumatic stress for some of us. And, I think that's probably especially true the more direct advocacy someone is doing, where they have more witnessing of some of this, whether it be videos or in person. So just really compassion for yourself that this takes a toll when you witness oppression or atrocities, things like that that do happen. And so we need to recognize that our emotional system and our nervous system might not always be equipped to handle that, and have some tools, which, maybe we'll talk about shortly, but we need to have tools to cope with some of the emotions that can come from witnessing this.
Yeah, I would definitely like to hear more about that. How do we take care of our mental and emotional health?
Yeah. So first we have to realize that it's important because I sometimes hear vegan advocates say things along the lines, that, well, the animals need me. I don't have time to care for myself. And that can be true in other advocacy movements as well, and even people like in my work, when I worked as a therapist, sometimes when we're caring for others, we can forget to care for ourselves, and that actually matters deeply, because we too are animals, we too are sentient beings, and we have limits and physiological needs and emotional needs. And if we don't acknowledge and kind of care for those, it can lead to burnout, and we may not be as effective as we want to be when we if we just kind of try to do the work, if you will, but not pause for self-care. So first to realize it's important, and then having things in place. So part of it, I think, is an overall lifestyle that has some balance to it. And I'll talk about that. And then secondly will be maybe specific tools for when we're feeling dysregulated. So, but first, just an overall lifestyle that includes things like adequate sleep, um, healthy nutrition to the degree we can. Sometimes as vegans, we're grateful that there's all kinds of vegan comfort food, and certainly that's good to have, but try to get your fruits and veggies too, because that actually does help your brain produce the neurochemicals that will help you regulate your nervous system and emotions better. So trying to take care of your nutrition, having some stress management tools in your life. For some of us, that can be time in nature. It could be time with our companion animals. It could be visiting a sanctuary. It could be doing meditation, spiritual practices, being with a dear friend, having fun sometimes, something that makes us laugh. So we do need those things in our life, because if we're only doing the work of advocacy or whatever work it might be, without that balance of self-care, we can burn out, and then we're not going to be as sustainable or as effective. So definitely having a lifestyle that supports some balance, and then recognizing too when you are getting triggered or overwhelmed, knowing your limits. One thing I will say is if your work doesn't require it, you don't want to be watching the videos or seeing the disturbing footage all the time. It's just our nervous system really is not geared for that without it causing damage in a sense. And so if you have to for your work, then having time out and knowing your limits. But if you don't have to do it for your work, once you've seen a certain amount, you don't necessarily have to see it all the time. And so knowing where your nervous system has its limits, and then, certain conversations could be triggering, just knowing when you need maybe a timeout, when you might need to kind of breathe and calm your nervous system down. Sometimes just kind words to yourself, like, okay, you're just feeling triggered right now. Let's take a time out. Let's do some breathing. Sometimes naming what you're feeling, writing out what you're feeling, and knowing feelings can move through us. We don't need to kind of stay stuck in them. We need to honor that they're there and realize they might be guiding us in some way, but then releasing them and letting ourselves come to a more grounded place. Anger is a normal feeling to injustice, but staying stuck in anger will not necessarily help us create the compassionate world we want to see. So we need ways to work through that. And it might even mean seeing a therapist. In Defense of Animals has a really good resource list of different therapists who are aligned with veganism. So that's one option. So, definitely sometimes we might need support along the way too, if so. And also in my book, I have a link to meditations that people can listen to. And so sometimes those guided meditations can be calming as well. So, and I can share that link with you too in the chat later on.
That'd be great. I love guided meditations. I'm not very good at just sitting there in silence, so it's like
Yes,
have someone talking it through and then remind you, okay, come, come back to the meditation. That's really helpful. Um, for people who maybe aren't as in like touch with their emotions, like how do you recognize that you might be triggered or like starting to get burnt out? And then what advice do you have someone for that? I mean, you kind of touched on that, but if you have anything else to add.
sure. Yeah. So sometimes we have different signs, I guess, that we're feeling overwhelmed. Maybe our body's all tense. That could be one indicator. Maybe we just want to vent and we don't want to listen to another person. We're only just wanting to vent what we are feeling. Maybe we're feeling super angry and just want to lash out at somebody. Um, Maybe we're exhausted. So there can be different signs for different people. You might also just feel really alone or really negative, or maybe you don't see hope of things changing. All those could be signs that either you're temporarily sort of triggered or maybe even kind of burned out because you've been in that triggered state for a long time. So just things aren't feeling as hopeful and you're feeling depleted or just kind of stuck in a chronic feeling of either discouragement or anger, some of those could be signs. And sometimes you just really need support. One of the stories I shared in my book, in the chapter on thriving emotionally as a vegan, I shared the story of a very long-term advocate who she had been vegan for, I think, 40 years, just a really long time. And she'd been through all stages of it. She'd been to where she was trying to convince everybody to change. And then she became a humane educator and found that she had a little bit more impact with that. And then she witnessed some very traumatic things through her advocacy work and had post-traumatic stress and didn't realize it. But some good friends sort of recognized that she wasn't seeming like herself. She was more discouraged and negative and kind of stuck in a difficult place. And in her case, she was having flashbacks of traumatic images of what was happening to animals. So she did see a therapist, and for her, that was major help. They helped her work through some of that to where she could include her own self-care more on a regular basis. So I just want to say it can be very real, and especially the more direct advocacy someone does, the more they could be at risk. So just your own self-care matters in this because even though veganism's been around for a while now, we're still forerunners in a movement that we hope will have a tipping point. But being a forerunner, that can be challenging. And so be very, compassionate to yourself too, that you're making a difference. See that you're making a difference. Even if the world isn't yet the world we want to see just yet, you are making a difference by what you do. And there is a ripple effect. So sometimes it's important to remember that.
Yeah, that can be very hard to remember when it seems like the whole world is like against you. So I really like that you said that. Well, moving to something positive, what gives you hope right now in the vegan movement?
Yeah. Well, first of all, one thing, interviewing people for my book was such an inspiration because I met this like-hearted community of people across the globe, and in fact, one person that I have sort of met through that community is here today, from Africa. So, there's just people, from California, and then I've met others like from Australia and India and just different places. And so, in all over the US and Canada, learning people's journeys and seeing how they're making a difference in their communities or just in their families, even through them living this lifestyle, that gives me hope. And then the other thing that gives me hope is I try each day to envision the world that I want to see. And so, even though that world is not fully manifest yet, that more compassionate, sustainable, healthy, connected world where we realize we're all interconnected and we care for one another and all sentient beings and the planet we live on. I just try to envision that. And what is my part in that? What is my, I can't, obviously, I'm not powerful enough to change everything I'd want to change. What is my part? What is my contribution? And just being curious about what that is and showing up for that. And those are the things that help to give me hope.
Nice. So if to leave so people can leave taking something away, like one thing that they could do if they want to be more effective advocates starting right after this call.
Yeah.
What can they do?
Yeah. And I will say two things. One is we talked earlier about pre-vegans. I think what I'm discovering is it can be really helpful to treat everybody as if they are a pre-vegan, no matter where they are on that continuum of change, because you just never know. I have heard that sometimes the people that protest the most or are most resistant, sometimes that's actually a sign they're wrestling with these issues and can actually be on the path. So kind of relating to everyone as if they're a pre-vegan and you're kind of seeing how you can support them in moving along the continuum of change wherever they might be. And the other is honoring your own unique way of sharing the message. You and I kind of referenced this earlier. I've always identified as an introvert. I don't always feel that I'm the strongest advocate when it comes to just one-on-one conversations with random people in my life. I do better as a writer, a teacher, and a speaker. Those are just what work better for me. But other people, they're going to be the person doing the direct advocacy or protests. Other people are going to be doing, speaking to the people in their life and sharing things that have such a meaningful impact that helps that person to open their eyes. Other people, it might be through their business that they're selling vegan products. Whatever your path is, that like your gifts, your passions, your experience guides you to, like you have your own unique way to share. And I think we need all of us with our unique ways to contribute to, because we want a world that's vegan. And so everybody's not going to be like us, but we each can have an impact with our own gifts.
Yeah, I like that. That's so true that we need a wide range of approaches and people with different specialties and what they do. So, very good. Well, those were all the questions I had planned. But if anyone here in the Zoom or I'm going to check the Facebook Live, anyone has any questions, we would love to take one or two. I'm just gonna look at Facebook. Does anyone here have anything? We have someone named Kenneth who is just saying how much he liked his book, or how much he liked your book, and it inspired him and some other people, some other teachers. So that's
Oh,
very nice.
good. That's wonderful to hear. That's awesome.
Oh,
And
I
I
see.
just I just
Some,
wanted to share with you, I just put the meditations link in the chat. So you're welcome to share that with people, that there's guided meditations that go with some of the chapters in the book in case people miss it when they go through the book, because I think it would be easy to miss. So,
yeah, I will definitely put that wherever this video is posted too, so people have that. Um, well, Angela, is there anything you wanted to say or add before we say goodbye?
well, first of all, people certainly can reach out to me via my website if there's questions. I love hearing people's experience with the book, and I just appreciate everybody being here. I appreciate everyone for trying in their own way to share veganism in the way that works for them. And again, speaking of different ways, a lot of my friends also teach cooking classes, and just different things that we can do to help others. So just knowing whatever your path is, it's awesome that you are stepping up to live this lifestyle and make a difference. Um, And also, I was sharing with Emma before we came on that I was really blessed that a couple of, people have responded to my book, that are not yet vegan. And so not only might it help you, but feel free to share it with the pre-vegans in your life that might be veg curious, because it could show them some positives that they didn't even realize about this lifestyle. So definitely it can be another tool in our advocacy toolkit.
Definitely, I will make sure to add the link to your book, of course, wherever this video is. I highly recommend everyone read it, pre-vegan or already vegan. And also, I wanted to add that we just wrapped up our this past year's cohort of Vegan Activist Academy here at Peace Advocacy Network, and that we are accepting pre-applications. So this is another way to learn activist skills. And we aren't launching until December, but if you pre-apply, then we'll let you know when the full application is open. That's a completely free program, and I hope you guys will check it out. But thank you so much, Angela, for coming on and teaching us about communication and the vegan journey. And we have some people in the chat saying, I love the book. Thanks for writing it. Thank you. Always good to have inspiration to share vegan values out in the world. Thank you all for your positive feedback. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.